The alien virus mutated. The human evolved faster. Part 1. The Starship Endeavour floated in the darkness of space, far from Earth and far from anything humans had ever known. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, his hands behind his back, watching the massive alien vessel on the view screen. The ship was beautiful in a strange way. It was silver and curved, shaped like a teardrop, and it glowed with soft blue lights along its surface. 3 days ago, they had made first contact with an alien species. 3 days ago, everything had changed. The aliens called themselves the Volari. They were tall and thin, with gray skin and long arms that reached almost to their knees. Their eyes were large and black, like pools of ink, and they moved with a grace that made humans look clumsy. When they spoke, their voices had a musical quality that the universal translator struggled to capture. Jake had shaken hands with the Volari ambassador, a being called Coordinator Thresh. It had been a historic moment. Cameras had recorded everything. Messages had been sent back to Earth. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. But something had gone wrong. Lieutenant Nina Davis walked onto the bridge, her face tight with worry. She was the chief medical officer of the Endeavour, a woman in her 30s with auburn hair and sharp green eyes. She had been working without sleep for 2 days, and it showed in the dark circles under her eyes. "Commander," she said, "we have a problem." Jake turned to face her. He had known Nina for 10 years. They had served together on 3 different ships. He had never seen her look so afraid. "How bad?" he asked. "Bad," Nina said. 17 crew members are in the medical bay. 3 more died this morning. The bridge went quiet. Jake felt his stomach drop. He had lost crew members before, but never like this. Never so fast and so mysterious. "What is it?" he asked. "What's killing them?" Nina took a deep breath. "A virus. Something we picked up from the Volari. It started with fevers and tiredness. We thought it was just stress from the first contact. But then the symptoms got worse. Organ failure. Internal bleeding. The body just shuts down." Jake looked back at the alien ship on the screen. The Volari had seemed so friendly, so eager to meet humans. Had they done this on purpose? Was this an attack? "Have you contacted the Volari?" he asked. "I sent them the medical data an hour ago," Nina said. "They're requesting an emergency meeting." The meeting took place in the conference room of the Endeavour. Jake sat at the head of the table with Nina on his right. Coordinator Thresh appeared on the large screen at the far end of the room, its alien face showing an expression that Jake had learned to read as distress. "We are deeply sorry," Thresh said through the translator. "We did not know this would happen. We did not mean to harm you. What is this virus?" Jake asked, keeping his voice calm even though his heart was racing. Thresh was silent for a moment. Then it spoke, and its words changed everything. "We call it the shifting plague. It has existed among the Volari for thousands of years. We are immune to it. We carry it in our bodies, but it does not hurt us. We did not know it could spread to other species." Nina leaned forward. "What does it do to other species?" "It kills them," Thresh said simply. "In 4,000 years, we have made contact with many civilizations. The shifting plague has destroyed them all. The mortality rate is 92%. Those who survive are often too few to continue their species." The room was silent. Jake felt cold spread through his body. They had shaken hands with extinction. "Is there a cure?" Nina asked. "No," Thresh said. "We have tried for centuries. The virus is adaptive. It changes and evolves faster than any treatment we can create. Every medicine we have tried, it learns to defeat. It is like fighting water. You cannot hold it. You cannot stop it." Jake closed his eyes. 240 people were on the Endeavour. His people. His responsibility. and he had led them to their deaths with a handshake. "We came to warn you," Thresh continued. "We came to tell you to quarantine your ship. Do not return to your home world. Do not spread the plague to your species. Let your deaths be contained. Let the rest of humanity survive." After the meeting ended, Jake walked to the medical bay. The room was full of beds, and most of them were occupied. Men and women lay under thin blankets, their faces pale and covered in sweat. Some of them were unconscious. Others looked at Jake with fear in their eyes. He stopped beside the bed of a young woman named Kay Reed. She was only 22 years old, fresh out of the academy. This was her first deep space mission. She had been so excited when they made first contact. Now, she was dying. "Commander," she whispered, her voice weak. "Are we going to be okay?" Jake wanted to lie. He wanted to tell her that everything would be fine, that the doctors would find a cure, that she would see Earth again. But he could not bring himself to say the words. "We're going to fight," he said instead. "That's all I can promise." He left the medical bay and walked to the observation deck. Through the large windows, he could see the stars stretching out into infinity. Somewhere out there was Earth, his home, his family. He would never see them again. Nina found him there an hour later. She stood beside him, looking out at the stars. "I've been studying the virus," she said. "Thresh was right. It adapts to everything. Every time I find a weakness, it changes. It's like it's alive in a way that viruses shouldn't be." "How long do we have?" Jake asked. "At this rate, maybe 2 weeks. 3, if we're lucky." Jake nodded slowly. 2 weeks. That was all the time they had left. 2 weeks to say goodbye, to make peace, to accept their fate. But something in Jake refused to accept it. Something deep inside him, something that had been passed down through millions of years of human evolution, refused to die quietly. "Keep working," he told Nina. "Don't give up." Nina looked at him with tired eyes. "Jake, you heard what they said. Dozens of species have tried to beat this thing. They all failed. They weren't human," Jake said. "Maybe that makes a difference. Maybe it doesn't. But we don't stop fighting until the last one of us is gone. That's who we are." Nina stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said. "I'll keep working." She walked away, heading back to her lab. Jake stayed on the observation deck, watching the stars and thinking about the fight ahead. The Valari had given up. They had accepted that the plague could not be beaten, but humans were different. Humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed them. Humans had clawed their way up from caves to starships. They did not know how to give up. The virus had found new prey. It did not know what it had started. The alien virus mutated. The human evolved faster part. 29 days had passed since the first symptoms appeared. 41 crew members were now infected. 23 of them had died. The medical bay had become a place of fear and sadness, filled with the sounds of labor breathing and quiet crying. Nina had not slept in 3 days. Her eyes were red, her hands shook when she held her instruments, and her coffee had gone cold hours ago. She sat in her lab, staring at the microscope screen, watching the virus do what it always did: mutate, change, evolve. Every time she thought she had found an answer, the virus became something new. She was about to give up hope when the alarm on bed 7 started beeping. Nina ran to the medical bay. Bed 7 belonged to Petty Officer Cole Harris, a 30-year-old engineer from Texas. He had been one of the first to get sick, and Nina had expected him to be one of the first to die. His fever had reached 106 degrees. His kidneys had started failing. She had already written a letter to his family, but when she reached his bed, she found something impossible. Cole was sitting up. His eyes were open and clear. His skin, which had been pale and gray just hours ago, was now pink and healthy. He looked at Nina and smiled. "Hey, Doc," he said. "Any chance I could get some breakfast? I'm really hungry." Nina stood frozen in place. This could not be real. People did not recover from the shifting plague. The Valari had told them that. Thousands of years of history had proven that. And yet Cole Harris was sitting in front of her, asking for breakfast. She ran every test she could think of. Blood samples, cell scans, neural readings. The results made no sense. The virus was still in Cole's body. It had not been destroyed or removed. But somehow, it was not hurting him anymore. His immune system had done something that should have been impossible. Instead of trying to kill the virus directly, his body had changed around it. His cells had altered their structure. His antibodies had evolved to make the virus harmless. "This can't be right," Nina whispered, staring at the data. Cole looked at her with curiosity. "Is something wrong?" "I feel fine. Better than fine, actually. I feel great." Nina looked up at him. "Your body didn't beat the virus. It adapted to it. In 9 days, your immune system evolved in ways that should take millions of years." Cole blinked. "Is that good?" "I don't know," Nina said honestly. "I don't know what this means." Over the next 12 hours, 3 more crew members recovered. Then 5 more. Then 8. The pattern was always the same. Their fevers would spike to dangerous levels. Their bodies would seem to shut down. And then suddenly, everything would reverse. They would wake up healthy, hungry, and somehow changed. Not everyone survived. 23 crew members died before their bodies could adapt. But those who lived through the crisis were different from before. Lieutenant Ben Parker was one of the survivors. He had been a tactical officer for 15 years, a calm and steady man who never panicked. But after his recovery, he noticed changes that he could not explain. "My reflexes are faster," he told Nina during his examination. "I was sparring with Martinez yesterday, and I could see his punches coming before he even threw them. It was like time slowed down." Nina ran more tests. Ben's neural pathways had been rewired. Signals traveled through his brain 30% faster than before. His muscles responded to commands almost instantly. He was not just healthy. He was enhanced. Similar reports came from other survivors. Some had sharper vision. Others could hear sounds that normal humans could not detect. A few reported that their thinking was clearer, that they could solve problems faster and remember things more easily. The virus had not just been defeated. It had been turned into a gift. Nina brought her findings to Commander Jake Morrison. They sat in his office, surrounded by screens showing medical data that neither of them fully understood. "So let me make sure I have this right," Jake said slowly. "The virus that was supposed to kill us has instead made us stronger?" "It's more complicated than that," Nina said. "The virus triggered something in our DNA. Humans have a lot of unused genetic material. Scientists always wondered what it was for. Now I think I know. It's a survival mechanism. When our bodies face a threat they cannot beat, they evolve to survive it." Jake leaned back in his chair. "The Valari said dozens of species have been killed by this plague. Why are we different?" Nina had thought about this question for hours. "Earth is a harsh planet, Jake. We evolved alongside thousands of diseases. The flu, smallpox, plague, AIDS. Our immune systems have been fighting and adapting for millions of years. We're not tougher than other species. We're just more stubborn. Our bodies refuse to give up." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question that had been on both their minds. "Can we help the Valari? Can we use what we've learned to save others?" Nina hesitated. "Maybe. I need to study the survivors more. I need to understand exactly how their bodies changed. But if I can figure that out, we might be able to create a treatment that works for other species." For the first time in days, Jake felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. He called for a ship-wide meeting. The survivors gathered in the main hall, still weak from their ordeals, but alive. The healthy crew members stood with them, their faces showing a mixture of relief and fear. "I know these past days have been hard," Jake said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "We lost friends, family, good people who deserved better. But we also did something that no other species has ever done. We survived." He paused, looking at the faces around him. "The Valari came to us with warnings. They told us to hide, to quarantine ourselves, to die quietly so we wouldn't spread the plague. They expected us to give up. But we didn't. We fought. And we won." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some people looked at each other with surprise. Others nodded slowly. "This isn't over," Jake continued. "We're going to study what happened to us. We're going to find out why we survived when others didn't. And then we're going to share what we learned. We're going to help the Valari and any other species that has suffered from this plague. Because that's what humans do. We don't just survive. We help others survive too." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Cole Harris started clapping. Others joined him, and soon the hall was filled with applause. They had faced extinction and survived. They had been changed in ways they did not fully understand. But they were still human, and they were ready to face whatever came next. In her lab, Nina looked at the virus under her microscope one more time. It was still there, still mutating, still trying to find a way to kill. But it had met its match. Human bodies had evolved faster than it could adapt. For the first time in 4,000 years, the shifting plague had lost, and humanity had won. The alien virus mutated. The human evolved faster. Part 3. Coordinator Thresh stood in the conference room of the Endeavor, its tall gray body trembling slightly. Its large black eyes moved across the medical data on the screens, and for a long time, it said nothing at all. Nina watched the alien carefully. She had learned to read Valari expressions over the past 2 weeks. The slight tilt of the head meant confusion. The rapid blinking meant disbelief. Right now, Thresh was showing both. "This is not possible," Thresh finally said, its musical voice flat with shock. "No species has ever survived the shifting plague. Not one? In 4,000 years of recorded history, we have watched civilization after civilization fall. We have seen worlds emptied of life. We have carried death wherever we went." Jake stepped forward. "And yet here we stand. 117 survivors. All of them healthy. All of them changed." Thresh turned its dark eyes to Jake. "Changed how?" Nina pulled up a holographic display. It showed a human cell before and after infection. The difference was striking. The after cell was more complex, more efficient, with new structures that had not existed before. "The virus triggered a rapid evolution in our bodies," Nina explained. "Our immune systems adapted to neutralize the threat. But they didn't stop there. They kept improving. Our survivors are stronger, faster, and smarter than they were before. The plague didn't just fail to kill us. It accidentally made us better." Thresh was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was barely a whisper. 4,000 years. 4,000 years we have searched for a cure. 4,000 years we have watched our friends die. We believed it was impossible. We believed death was the only outcome." The alien's long fingers touched the holographic display, tracing the outline of the evolved human cell. "And now you tell us that humans, a species we met only weeks ago, have done what we could not. You have beaten the plague. You have turned it into a gift." Lieutenant Ben Parker, who had been standing quietly by the door, spoke up. "It wasn't easy. 23 of our people died. Their bodies couldn't adapt fast enough. 23, Thresh repeated. Out of 240. A mortality rate of less than 10%. The alien made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. Among the Valari, that would be considered a miracle. Jake walked closer to the alien ambassador. We didn't ask for this fight. We didn't want to lose anyone. But we survived, and now we have a choice. We can keep this knowledge to ourselves, or we can share it. We can help others. Thresh looked at him with those deep black eyes. Why would you help us? We brought this plague to you. We killed your people. You should hate us. You didn't know, Nina said gently. You thought you were making friends. You had no idea you were carriers. Ignorance is no excuse for murder, Thresh said. Maybe not, Jake agreed. But it's also not a reason for revenge. You didn't choose to carry the plague. You didn't choose to spread it. You're as much a victim as anyone else. The difference is that you have to live with the guilt while others just died. The alien was quiet. Its long fingers trembled at its sides. There are many species out there who have suffered because of us, Thresh said slowly. The Krith lost half their population. The Delians abandoned 12 colony worlds. The Morthacs have been in quarantine for 3 centuries. If you could help them, if you could give them what you have found, you would save billions of lives. Nina felt her heart beat faster. This was what she had hoped for. A chance to do something meaningful. A chance to turn their suffering into something good. We would need your help, she said. Your medical knowledge, your technology, your connections with other species. We can't do this alone. You would have everything we possess, Thresh said. Every resource, every scientist, every ship. If there is any chance that human immunity can be shared with others, we will do whatever it takes to make it happen. Jake nodded slowly. Then let's get started. The work began immediately. Valari scientists joined Nina in her lab, bringing equipment and knowledge that humans had never seen before. They worked around the clock, studying the survivors, mapping their genetic changes, trying to understand exactly what had made them different. It was not easy. Human biology was unique in ways that the Valari had never encountered. Earth's harsh environment had created an immune system that was almost aggressive in its defense of the body. Human cells fought back against threats with a fury that surprised the alien scientists. Your bodies are constantly at war, one Valari researcher noted with amazement. Even when you are healthy, your immune system is fighting. Bacteria, viruses, parasites. You live in a state of constant battle. We don't think about it, Mina said with a shrug. It's just how we are. It is extraordinary, the researcher said. No wonder you survived the plague. Your bodies were already prepared to fight. After 3 weeks of intensive research, they made a breakthrough. Nina discovered that the antibodies created by human survivors could be synthesized and adapted for other species. The process was complex and required careful modification for each different biology, but it was possible. They tested the treatment on a Valari volunteer who had been exposed to an active strain of the plague. For 3 days, the volunteer lay in the medical bay, their body fighting the infection. Everyone watched and waited, hoping and fearing in equal measure. On the 4th day, the volunteer opened their eyes. I feel strange, they said weakly, but I am alive. Tests confirmed it. The treatment had worked. The volunteer's immune system had adapted, just like the human survivors. They were not enhanced in the same way humans were, but they were immune to the plague. Thresh was in the room when the results came in. The alien ambassador stood very still, staring at the data on the screen. Then, slowly, it turned to Jake and Nina. You have given us hope, Thresh said, its voice thick with emotion. For the first time in 4,000 years, we have hope. Jake put his hand on the alien's shoulder. It was a human gesture, one that the Valari did not use. But Thresh seemed to understand. "This is just the beginning," Jake said. "We have a lot of work ahead of us. We need to refine the treatment, adapt it for different species, distribute it across the galaxy. It will take years, maybe decades. We will have help," Thresh said. "When other species learn what you have done, they will want to join us. They will want to be part of this miracle." Nina smiled tiredly. "Let's not call it a miracle just yet. We still have a long way to go." But even as she said the words, she felt something warm growing in her chest. Pride. Hope. The sense that they were doing something important. Something that mattered. The virus had come to kill them. Instead, it had given them the chance to save a galaxy, and they were going to take that chance. The alien virus mutated. The human evolved faster part, 1 year after the Endeavor made first contact. The medical fleet arrived at Valari Prime. Nina stood on the observation deck of the hospital ship Hope, watching the alien world grow larger in the viewport. Valari Prime was a beautiful planet, covered in silver forests and blue oceans. Cities rose from the landscape like crystal towers, glittering in the light of their twin suns. But there was sadness hidden beneath the beauty. The outer colonies of the Valari Cooperative had been devastated by the shifting plague. Billions of people lived in isolation, trapped in quarantine zones that had existed for centuries. Entire families had been separated. Children had grown up never knowing the touch of another being. Today, that would begin to change. Dr. Nina Davis was no longer just the ship's medical officer. She was now the director of the Galactic Medical Initiative, an organization created to distribute the human-derived treatment across the galaxy. Behind her stood a team of 50 human doctors and scientists, all of them survivors of the original outbreak, all of them carrying the antibodies that could save lives. Commander Jake Morrison had come too. He was no longer in charge of the Endeavor. He had been promoted to admiral and given command of the entire humanitarian fleet. It was a job he had never asked for, but one he had accepted without hesitation. "Are you ready?" he asked, standing beside Nina as the ship prepared to land. "No," she admitted. "But I don't think anyone could be ready for something like this." They landed in the capital city of Valari Prime. Thousands of aliens had gathered to watch, their tall gray bodies filling the streets and rooftops. Some of them held signs with messages of welcome. Others simply stared in silence, their large black eyes filled with a hope they had never dared to feel before. Coordinator Thresh met them at the landing platform. The alien ambassador looked different from how Nina remembered. There was a lightness to its movements, a brightness in its eyes. It looked like someone who had been carrying a heavy weight and had finally been allowed to put it down. "Welcome to our home," Thresh said, spreading its long arms in a gesture of greeting. "You have traveled far to help us. We will never forget this kindness." Jake shook the ambassador's hand. "We're here to do a job. Let's not celebrate until the job is done." The work was hard and often heartbreaking. The treatment worked well for most Valari, but not all. Some were too old or too sick to survive the adaptation process. Others had immune systems that were too weak to make the necessary changes. For every 10 patients they treated, 1 or 2 did not survive. Nina spent long hours in the medical centers, working alongside Valari doctors who had spent their whole lives fighting a disease they could not beat. She saw the joy on the faces of families who were reunited after decades of separation. She also saw the grief of those who lost loved ones just days before the treatment arrived. It was exhausting. It was painful. But it was also the most meaningful work she had ever done. After 6 months on Valari Prime, the fleet received a message from another world. The Krith, an insectoid species that lived in massive underground hives, had heard about the treatment. They wanted help. The Krith had suffered terribly from the shifting plague. Half their population had died in a single outbreak 3 centuries ago. The survivors had sealed themselves underground, cutting off all contact with the outside universe. They had lived in darkness and isolation ever since. Jake led the mission personally. His ship, the Unity, traveled for 3 weeks through empty space to reach the Krith homeworld. When they arrived, they found a planet that looked dead from orbit. No lights, no signals, no signs of life. But the Krith were there, hiding beneath the surface, waiting. The negotiations were difficult. The Krith did not trust outsiders. They had been betrayed too many times. They demanded proof that the treatment worked before they would allow any humans to enter their hives. Nina provided blood samples and medical data. She showed them recordings of Valari patients recovering from the plague. She answered hundreds of questions from Krith scientists who had spent their lives studying a disease they could not cure. Finally, after 2 months of talks, the Krith Queen agreed to a trial. 100 volunteers were selected from the hives. They were brought to the surface, blinking in sunlight they had not seen in centuries. Human doctors administered the treatment while Krith observers watched every step. The waiting was agonizing. The Krith biology was different from anything the team had encountered before. Their bodies were armored and segmented, with multiple hearts and a decentralized nervous system. Nina had modified the treatment as best she could. But there was no way to know if it would work until the trial was complete. On the 7th day, the first volunteer woke up. Her name was something that human tongues could not pronounce. A series of clicks and whistles that meant something like brave light. She was young by Krith standards, only 40 years old. She had volunteered because she was tired of living in fear. "How do you feel?" Nina asked through the translator. Brave Light's compound eyes glittered in the artificial light. "I feel free," she said. "For the first time in my life, I feel free." 92 of the 100 volunteers survived the treatment. It was a higher success rate than anyone had expected. The Krith Queen declared it a miracle and ordered the treatment to be distributed throughout the hives. Within a year, the Krith emerged from their underground cities for the first time in 3 centuries. They built new settlements on the surface. They sent ships to explore the stars. They joined the growing coalition of species that humanity was building. And they remembered who had saved them. The work continued. The Delians, an aquatic species that lived in vast ocean cities, were next. Then the Morthax, beings made of living silicon who communicated through vibrations in stone. Each species presented new challenges. Each required modifications to the treatment. Each lost some patients along the way, but each one was saved. Nina kept a list in her personal files. It started with the 23 crew members who had died on the Endeavor. Over the years, she added more names. Valari who did not survive the treatment. Krith who were too weak to adapt. Delians and Morthax and dozens of other species who had come so close to survival but had not quite made it. The list was long. It was painful to read. But Nina looked at it every night before she went to sleep. "We remember them," she would whisper in the darkness. "We remember them so that their deaths have meaning." Jake found her one night, sitting alone in her office, staring at the list. "You should get some sleep," he said gently. "I know," she said. "I will. I just needed a moment." Jake sat down across from her. His hair had gone gray in the years since the Endeavor. His face was lined with wrinkles, but his eyes were still sharp, still full of the determination that had kept them alive when everyone else expected them to die. "You've saved millions of lives," he said. "Billions, probably. You should be proud." "I am proud," Nina said. "But I also remember the ones we couldn't save. Every single one. That's what makes you good at this job," Jake said. "You care. You never stop caring." Nina smiled sadly. "Sometimes I wonder if that's a strength or a weakness." "It's both," Jake said. "That's what makes it human." They sat together in silence for a while. Two old friends who had been through more than most people can imagine. Outside the window, the stars shone bright and cold, full of worlds waiting to be saved. The work was not finished. The virus still existed. It still mutated and evolved. But humanity was ready. They had already proven that they could evolve faster. The alien virus mutated. The human evolved faster. Part 550. Years had passed since the day that changed everything. Admiral Jake Morrison, now in his 80s, but looking no older than 50, stood on the observation deck of Unity Station. The station was enormous, the largest structure ever built by any species in the known galaxy. It hung in space like a silver wheel, spinning slowly against the backdrop of stars. Through the transparent walls, Jake could see ships from a dozen different worlds. Valari cruisers with their teardrop shapes. Krith transports covered in geometric patterns. Delian vessels that looked like giant bubbles of water. Human explorers with their sharp angles and powerful engines. All of them coming and going, sharing the same space, the same station, the same future. It was beautiful. It was impossible. It was real. The door behind him opened and Nina walked in. Her hair had turned completely silver over the years, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. She moved slowly, using a cane for support, but she refused to let age slow her down. Still staring at the view? She asked with a small smile. "I never get tired of it," Jake said. "Do you remember what they told us on the Endeavor? That we should die quietly. That we should accept our fate." "I remember," Nina said. "I also remember you telling me that humans don't know how to give up." Jake nodded slowly. "I was scared when I said that. I didn't really believe it. I just didn't want to admit that we were going to die. But we didn't die," Nina said. "And now look at us." They stood together in silence, watching the ships pass by. 50 years of work. 50 years of struggle. 50 years of building something new from the ashes of what almost destroyed them. The survivors of the original plague had changed in ways that no one had expected. Their enhanced abilities had been passed down to their children, who had passed them down to their children. A new generation of humans had emerged, stronger and faster and smarter than their ancestors. They lived longer too, their bodies healing faster and resisting disease better than any human had before. Some people called them evolved. Others called them the next step in human development. The Valari called them the adapted ones and treated them with a respect that bordered on reverence. Jake just called them human. Different from before, maybe, but still human. Still capable of love and hate, kindness and cruelty, courage and fear. Still struggling to figure out what it meant to be alive in a universe that did not care about them. A Valari ambassador approached them, moving with the slow grace of its kind. It was young, barely 100 years old, born long after the plague had been cured. It had never known the fear of infection. It had grown up in a galaxy where humans and Valari were allies, where the shifting plague was a threat that could be fought and beaten. Admiral Morrison. "Dr. Davis, the Council has asked me to inform you that the memorial is ready." Jake nodded. "Thank you. We'll be there shortly." They walked slowly through the corridors of Unity Station. People of all species passed them by, nodding in respect. Some of them were old enough to remember the early days, when the treatment was new and the future was uncertain. Others had only heard the stories, passed down through generations like legends of ancient heroes. The central atrium of the station had been transformed for the occasion. A massive holographic display filled the space, showing images and names of all those who had died. The 23 crew members of the Endeavor came first. Then the Valari who had not survived the treatment. Then the Krith and Delians and Morthax and all the others, who had been lost along the way. The display stretched upward until it touched the distant ceiling. A tower of light made from millions of names. Jake stood before it, feeling the weight of all those lives pressing down on him. He had known some of them personally. He had held their hands as they died. He had written letters to their families. He had carried their memories with him through all the years since. "We gather here today to remember," said the Volari High Coordinator, speaking to the assembled crowd. "We remember those who died so that others might live. We remember the price that was paid for the freedom we now enjoy. We remember the humans who faced extinction and chose to fight." The crowd was silent. Thousands of beings from dozens of species, all standing together, all united by the memory of what they had almost lost. 50 years ago, we believed there was no hope, the High Coordinator continued. We believed the shifting plague could never be defeated. We were wrong. Humans showed us a different path. They showed us that evolution is not something that happens over millions of years. It is something that happens when living beings refuse to accept their fate. Jake felt Nina's hand slip into his. Her fingers were thin and fragile, but her grip was strong. "I've been thinking about Cole Harris," she said quietly. "The first one to recover. Do you remember what he said when he woke up?" Jake smiled. "He asked for breakfast." "He asked for breakfast," Nina repeated. He had just survived something that should have killed him. His body had evolved in ways that no one understood. And his first thought was that he was hungry. "That's very human," Jake said. "Yes," Nina said. "It is." The ceremony continued, with representatives from each species coming forward to speak. They shared stories of loss and recovery, of despair and hope. They talked about family members who had been saved by the treatment. They thanked the humans who had made it all possible. Jake listened, but his mind was far away. He was thinking about the Endeavor, floating alone in space with a dying crew. He was thinking about the fear he had felt, the certainty that they were all going to die. He was thinking about the moment when Cole Harris sat up in his bed and asked for coffee. They had been so close to extinction. One small change in the virus, one tiny difference in human biology, and everything would have been different. Humanity would have been just another name on the list of species destroyed by the plague. Earth would have been a dead world, its cities crumbling to dust, its people forgotten. But that was not what happened. Instead, humanity had survived. They had evolved. They had become something new, and they had used that gift to help others. The ceremony ended, and the crowd began to disperse. Jake and Nina stayed behind, standing before the memorial, reading the names that glowed in the air. "Do you have any regrets?" Nina asked. Jake thought about the question for a long time. "I regret the ones we lost," he said finally. "I wish we could have saved everyone. I wish no one had to die. But if it hadn't happened at all," Nina said, "if we had never made contact with the Volari, if we had never gotten sick, would you take it back?" Jake looked at the memorial, at the thousands of names, at the tower of light that reached toward the stars. "No," he said, "I wouldn't take it back. Because something good came from all that pain. Something that mattered." Nina nodded. "That's what I thought you'd say." They walked out of the atrium together, leaving the memorial behind. Outside, the stars waited for them. Patient, infinite, full of possibilities. The virus had mutated. The human had evolved faster. And the galaxy would never be the same. Some stories end with death and darkness. But this one ended with life and light. It ended with a universe that had been changed by the simple, stubborn refusal of one species to accept their fate. It ended with hope. And for Jake Morrison and Nina Davis and all the others who had fought to make it happen, that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.